Welcome back to another video on the channel. Newcastle United lost 2-0 to Manchester City today in the early kick-off in the Premier League, and that is obviously a really disappointing result for Newcastle. But if we're realistic, going to Manchester City the week after losing a cup final, it's probably the worst fixture we could have picked. And so, for me, I feel like this was really a line in the sand after today's game. Obviously, we've been on a bit of a rubbish run of form. We haven't scored many goals this year, and we've obviously started to lose games. Things do need to change. I think we can all agree that Eddie Howe needs to change stuff within the team, within the squad, and I think he's probably been waiting until after the cup final and after the Man City game. So what does need to change then? Well, I think there's two players in the team who have been regulars, especially when they're fit, who I think have got big question marks over them at the moment. And one of them is Dan Burn, like I've just mentioned, and I think the other one is Callum Wilson. Now, for me, I love Dan Burn, I love what he's done. I think that he came in last season, made us stronger. He was obviously playing centre-back at the end of last season, but then he's been moved to this left, playing as left-back. That has worked up to a point, but since the World Cup, I feel like teams have figured him out a little bit. I'm not saying he's played particularly badly. We've still obviously had a really good defensive record. He's not a natural fit on the left, and in an attacking sense, he doesn't always help whichever player is playing in front of him on the left-hand side, and that's kind of my issue with Burn playing on the left. I'd like to see a left-back who can sort of get forward more, support the attacking play more, because let's be honest, we are struggling scoring goals and attacking well. I would drop Dan Burn to the bench and I would bring Target in and try it as Target at left-back. If Cher is still not fit, I would then move Burn into centre-half and then Target onto the left rather than playing Lascelles again. But if Cher's fit, I do think that Burn should drop down to the bench for the time being and bring Target in and just see if it gives us something different. In terms of Callum Wilson, I don't know what's going on with him. He has had chances to score goals, and his usual kind of really good casual finishing has just kind of deserted him at the moment. And I don't know if he's lacking in confidence or belief, but since the World Cup, I just think he's not really justifying his starting position in that team, especially when we've got Isak, who's sat on the bench, and every time he comes on, he looks really, really good. Now, I know that they're not exact like-for-like players. Isak's more of a forward rather than an out-and-out striker, but he can play as a lone striker, and he's shown that he can score goals as a lone striker. So I want to see Isak back in the team. The other real debate is about Saint-Maximin as well, and whether he should maintain his starting place, which he's had for the last few games, or whether someone else needs to come in. And I think that is a fair debate to be had as well, because personally for me, Saint-Maximin is a good player. We obviously don't rely on him like we did under Steve Bruce, and I don't know whether he's struggled to adapt to that a little bit, but really he hasn't been as effective as we want him to be. And I think that there is a real case there for him leaving in the summer, because I'm not sure he fits Eddie Howe's style. You know, as supporters, there's a lot of debate on Twitter about people sort of saying, "Oh, we're not moaning about the team if things aren't going well, we're allowed to do that," and that is completely true, and I totally get that. But I do feel like there's a bit of a disconnect between what the fans sort of desire and the reality of our squad, and I feel like people need to realise that we did overachieve in the first half of the season before the World Cup. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be aiming for, top 4, top 6. What I'm saying is, the fact is our squad just isn't quite there. And if we get top 4, amazing. We're in a position where we can still try and do that. But I think if we still finish in the top 6, we should be really delighted with that as a season. Now, at this point, I would feel really disappointed if we didn't finish in the top 6. So I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we can't complain about failure, if you want to call it failure. But I just think there's no right that we have no divine right to finish in the top 4. And as well as we were doing, other teams were always going to come back stronger. And I'm not saying we can't get top 4. I do believe if we can start next week winning games, we can turn this around and push for top 4. But the reality is our squad is not deep enough. I've also seen a bit of criticism about Eddie Howe starting to appear, like, because he's not changing stuff enough. But again, I think that he's looked at the cup final, the Man City game, as being like drawing a line in the sand, and I believe that he will change stuff next week. But it's also worth mentioning that really he is limited with what he can change. I know we have improved the squad. There are more options, but ultimately, his hands are still tied a bit, and it's going to take another 2-3 transfer windows before we've got a squad where we can really, really rotate players from match to match or month to month and give players a rest. Part of it is just bad finishing. That, you know, we are still creating chances. Like against Man City, we created 3 or 4 really, really, really good chances. We didn't take one of them, so that is an issue. But again, that is down to the players, and that is something that will need addressing over the next few transfer windows. And I think that we need to sort of remember that when we're criticising them. I'm not saying we can't criticise. I'm not saying that we can't have issues with where we're at and be really happy just because we're not in a relegation battle. We are progressing as a club, so expectations are going to rise, and that's completely fine. But I do also think we need to be realistic about where the squad is at this moment in time. So, just going to finish with my team, what I would play against Wolves. So obviously, Joe Linton is suspended, so that's kind of going to force Eddie Howe's hand a little bit. So I think it'll be Pope in goal. I'd like to see Trippier, Schär, Botman and Targett as the back 4. I think the midfield 3 sort of picks itself. It'll be Longstaff, Willock and Bruno. And then the forward 3, Miggy I've not talked about, and maybe that's another discussion for another day, but I think he'll stick with Miggy because of work rate. Gordon on the left, Isak through the middle. That's the team I would play against Wolves next week. I'd love to know what you would play next week, who you would play. Do you agree with me? Would you play Saint-Maximin instead of Miggy, maybe on the right? Let me know. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you really soon for another video.